What's a lie everyone believes that annoys you the most? That arguing with someone means that you're being disrespectful. I feel like it has been a universal childhood experience to try to explain yourself to your parents only for them to say, talking back is rude. And so people tend to carry this with them growing up, and it ends up making people too scared to see conflict between others that they either resort to anger when someone argues with them or stay out of any conflicts entirely. Like, yeah, if you intentionally be rude, then yes, being argumentative could be a problem. But by default, I understand arguing as trying to combine two thoughts with the goal of both parties learning something. Story 2. That disabled people are just lazy and looking for a handout when they apply for disability. Trying applying for a disability and waiting for years and wading through appeal after appeal to finally get it. It's way too freaking tedious to try to get money that way. Trust me, living off my retirement for 2 years, watching it all vanish at 46, unable to get out of bed in constant pain. Applying for a disability sucks and doesn't guarantee you'll get anything at all. If I don't get it, I will be homeless, and being homeless will end me. It's such BS believing anyone would want this. Story 3. A lot of things about medieval and Renaissance Europe that they didn't bathe and smelled like crap. They bathed regularly and considered that bad smells were bad omens and a sign of disease. If they noticed a bad smell or a mess on their bodies, they would just take a quick dip in the village river or in a wooden barrel-like tub. There is a reason why medieval folktales involve the common motif of a beautiful maiden bathing in a river stream. Victorians basically made up this myth and were also the ones who then proceeded to share theories about why bathing too much is bad for you. The Victorian era was filled with pseudo-scientific nonsense like this, that their food was always bland, they didn't eat a lot of meat because of their agrarian lifestyle and because the rich were gatekeeping it as a luxury, but the meat they ate, the vegetables, the stews, etc., were seasoned with whatever herbs they could grow in their area. That they passed away at 40, life expectancy was low because of infant mortality rates and childbirth-related passing. If you made it past age 5 or 6, you had a good chance of making it into your 60s and 70s. That people were just terminated for the smallest offenses. They simply weren't. A lord would usually not even have torture devices, and if they did, they probably wouldn't be wasting them or his court's money on a peasant who pocketed a few grains of wheat for his family. But they were hateful. They mostly minded their own business. They had no time to mind yours when their fields and animals needed care 24/7. They were just as curious as us, as you and me are. They had the same human nature as us, so when a foreigner or a weird person would show up in their village, they would treat them with curiosity and interest, not straight-up hate. The hateful rhetoric was mainly spread by the church in their "everyone does this" way, that everyone was either an illiterate peasant or a rich lord. Men usually took their father's profession. This is why we have common family names, such as Smith nowadays. If your dad was a blacksmith, you'd probably be a blacksmith too. Depending on the profession, women were sometimes initiated too. Cities had a balanced demographic of farmers who usually worked the fields around the outskirts. Among many other professions, medieval cities were literally crowded with people from all walks of life. That they only drank ale, beer, and cheap wine because the water was contaminated. That bodies were just hurled in rivers, absolutely untrue. Water was literally the engine that moved their life forward. Settlements were built along the beds of rivers for quick access to clean water. They built wells for clean water, they cooked with water, etc. This myth probably originated from the habit of medieval lords of poisoning the wells of their enemies during wartime, which also wasn't that common. The medieval lords who did this practice were known for it. For bodies, they had morgues and they were typically buried very soon after passing. I won't even get into it, but a lot of things about Versailles. There are so many myths about Versailles that I would need several Reddit posts to debunk them all. For one, they didn't crap in the halls and it didn't smell of excrements. That was just gossip. Versailles was equipped with all sorts of sanitary rooms and measures, latrines, public toilets, etc. We have literal receipts for the maintenance of their sanitary systems. Versailles being full of excrement was the latest sensationalism of that era, no different from the tactics of modern news channels. It is also noteworthy to consider that the majority of things we know about the medieval era was from church sources because most people were illiterate and clerics were not. The church had a heavy agenda to push, so everything we know about medieval life must be taken with a grain of salt. The church also used to phrase their articles like "people do this" and "everyone does that" when they wanted the illiterate masses to start doing something. Likewise, the Victorians made up a lot of the myths that are widely circulated about medieval civilization. They did this to differentiate themselves from people they saw as their savage ancestors, to make themselves seem more refined and advanced compared to medieval people. The Middle Ages were the boogeyman of the Victorian era. That is not to say that the Middle Ages were impeccable like in fantasy media, but they weren't nearly as half as bad as the myths claim. The main important difference is that they just didn't have the technology and access to information that we have nowadays, but other than that, life was mostly peaceful and settled. Story 4. Sugar in the gas tank. I work in automotive, which makes me hate this one. Sugar in a gas tank doesn't really do much of anything. Sugar doesn't dissolve in gas the way it dissolves in water. It just falls to the bottom of the tank as general debris and is filtered out by the pump stock and fuel filter. You'd have to add literal multiple bags of sugar to a tank to cause a real problem. And then it's not working because it's sugar. It could be sand, sugar, baking powder, flour, or anything else. You're just clogging it with debris at that point. Also, for the love of God and all that is holy, brakes, brakes, equals what stops your car. Brakes, breaks, equals when something has been broken and no longer works, like my hand and skull from face palming every time someone mixes these two up. Story 5. One that really gets me is, if you work hard, you'll always succeed. Hard work helps a lot, but it's not the whole story. Timing, access to opportunities, luck, connections, health, and even where you were born matter a lot. Plenty of people work incredibly hard and still struggle, and that doesn't mean they're lazy or doing something wrong. It's annoying because it blames individuals for failures that are often structural or situational. It dismisses inequality and real-life barriers. It makes people feel guilty instead of informed. For me, the better truth is, hard work increases your chances, but it doesn't guarantee outcomes. Strategy, support, and circumstances matter too. Story 6. 1. The hunter/gatherer myth. Not everyone believed it, but too many still do. Men are the hunters, women are the gatherers, or men will provide and women support. Anthropology has proven that this is not true. Earlier in civilization, humans lived in egalitarian or matrilineal societies where women hunted and gathered. They hunted both big and small animals and made their own hunting tools. In fact, it's hypothesized that women were better at long hunts because of the endurance that estrogen provides. The quote-unquote man the hunter narrative is a giant lie that it was often told to enforce gender roles and keep women in the home. The patriarchy isn't a natural order. Studies show that women are excellent leaders in a crisis, yet men make up the majority of presidents, prime ministers, and judicial authorities, even though more than half the population is female. 2. The alpha/beta wolf fallacy. The term was coined by Rudolf Schenkel and popularized by David Mech, who later debunked it. Mech has since spent decades trying to educate people about his mistake. The concept originated from an unrelated study of captive wolves. Wild wolf packs don't have a strict hierarchy like the patriarchy. They are literally just family units led by the parents. Red pill figures use this myth to prey upon men's insecurities and entice them into buying courses on how to be successful. It's like astrology, but worse. At least astrology is based on the positioning of celestial bodies. This is just 4 arbitrary categories used to rank who is the best. 3. Why men have to pay the bill. People follow this rule without ever questioning its origin, which leads to silly arguments at best and the coercion of gender at worst. Think about history. If women weren't allowed to work, own property, or have a bank card, what were they supposed to do? Men had control over the money, so men paid. This became synonymous with being a man and was passed down through generations. On first dates, just pay for your own crap. It isn't a nice action if you're only doing it because it's societally expected, especially if you use it to pressure women into intimacy like they're a vending machine. Men, stop feeling emasculated when women pay. If the best you can offer is money, then don't complain about attracting gold diggers when that is exactly what you are advertising. 4. Pink for girls, blue for boys. Before this standard, blue was for girls because it was seen as soft and dainty, while pink was for boys because it was seen as a stronger version of red. There weren't gendered colors originally because, frankly, why would there be? This standard was solidified after World War II when companies wanted people to spend more money by discouraging hand-me-downs between siblings of different genders. You've been sold on colors just so corporations could take your money. Now boys are bullied and some have even been terminated for wearing a color. Pink Shirt Day honors those who were targeted for breaking this manufactured norm. 5. Gender are non-binary. Just looking at chromosomes or genitalia doesn't place people into one of only 2 categories. Intersex people exist. There are millions of intersex individuals worldwide. Since the categories include female, intersex, and male, gender is not a binary. There is no perfect definition for what makes a man or a woman. Chromosomes and genitalia are just puzzle pieces, not the whole picture. If you feel like a man, great, but don't make others feel bad because your binary concept doesn't fit their reality. Someone else's identity does not affect you. This isn't new either. History is full of non-binary and trans people. To argue against that is to argue with reality. Story 7. It's not the worst one by far and is extremely niche, but the fact that people keep repeating the myth that we had a near-extinction event associated with the Toba eruption really annoys me. The Toba eruption had zero effect on the human population as far as we can tell. The supposed population restriction bottleneck didn't happen at the same time, and it was a misinterpretation of a population growth, not a collapse, because initial researchers had been looking at a small portion of the overall global population. They misread population expansion from a small group of people moving into a new area and having lower genetic diversity due to the founder effect. The Toba eruption almost made us go extinct myth gets repeated all the time, despite having been disproved almost as soon as it was proposed in the 90s and repeatedly by various different methods since. Damn thing still comes up often on pop-sci sites and on Reddit posts and comments. Story 8. Well, I just learned very recently that COVID isn't over at all. It causes young onset dementia symptoms or the disease itself in some cases and strokes, yes, even in January 2026. I'm now very annoyed with myself, my peer pressure, conformity, and my own mindlessness forever believing almost everyone who claimed it was over and safe to stop wearing a mask. Luckily, I also learned that masks do work decently to a certain extent, even if it's just one-way masking by the uninfected, though they work best when the infected person is the one wearing it. Now, I'm annoyed about what to do with this info and how to eat or drink away from home in a society that doesn't mask because they, too, don't realize we are still in a pandemic in January 2026. Story 9. People can rise from the ground. Think about it. Astrology is for weirdo freaks, but it's perfectly okay to believe that people can rise from the ground. It's freaking crazy. Who is the crazy in the room? And we put these crazy people into positions of power. It's freaking crazy crap, man. Pure people can't have babies. Trees don't catch on fire and talk. You can't split the sea in two. Rules of behavior etched in stone by a god. It's just so much crazy stuff for lunatics, and they think they are the chosen ones. It's a cult, man. It really is. Story 10. That doctors are part of a conspiracy to make people sicker. I'm a doctor, and I'm legitimately just trying to do my best. I make about $200,000, but after taxes and my med school loans, I honestly don't think I'm wealthy by any means. I absolutely am not a doctor just to make money off people being sick. I just do my best to help people and afford a living for myself and my family, but more and more I get patients, friends, and family who tell me about how much of a conspiracy healthcare is, that it's just doctors making money and making people sick. I mean, maybe in other specialties, I'm in the ER, but it saddens me because I went into this in the first place to figure out how to fix people, probably on a daily basis. I talk to people who tell me about something they saw on Google or YouTube, and I don't know how to respond to that, especially when I know they are believing blatant lies. Story 11. That vaccines are dangerous is a myth. People are just very bad at understanding statistics and the likelihood of things happening. They are incredibly effective and statistically very unlikely to cause major complications or anything other than an initial immune response like a slight fever compared to the damage the diseases themselves inflict. Natural immunity is not any better in terms of immune response and is sometimes worse. As was shown with people who had COVID vaccines versus immunity from getting COVID, the vaccinated individuals had antibodies for longer. The initial study about the MMR vaccine causing autism has been disproven. The author was peddling his own products, yet people still believe this. Before most vaccines existed, 1 in 5 kids did not make it to age 5 as of 1900. Sorry, but if your kid is autistic, it's genetic, and maybe grandpa likes trains a little too much, if you know what I mean. People don't trust big pharma, but the wellness industry is huge and is just as profit motivated, but without any evidence that their products actually work. Story 12. That 50 Shades of Grey happened as a result of 9/11. The supposed domino effect goes, 9/11 happens, Gerard Way witnesses it and is inspired to start My Chemical Romance. Stephanie Meyer writes Twilight as an MCR fanfiction and bases Edward Cullen on Gerard Way. E.L. James writes 50 Shades as Twilight fanfiction. In reality, MCR was a relatively underground band from New Jersey until they signed with Reprise Records and released their second album, 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge, in 2004. That was when they blew up in the US and internationally. Stephanie Meyer started writing Twilight in June 2003, and by 2004, she was already looking for literary agents. The book finally came out in 2005. She lived in Arizona with her husband, so unless she was traveling to the East Coast to attend underground punk rock shows, there's no way she knew about Gerard Way and MCR, let alone write a fan fiction about him. Also, Edward Cullen is canonically a redhead. Story 13. That the housing crisis is due to a lack of supply, or at least that building more houses and changing zoning to allow for it is the most direct solution to the problem. There are enough houses in the US right now to house every person and then some. The issue is with who controls the supply that exists. Sure, a piece of that is zoning, but a much, much larger part is private equity owning a devastatingly large portion of the housing and engaging in monopolistic practices. They are using their illegal price-fixing apparatuses like RealPage to exert complete control over the rental market and buying up all of the supply, so you're forced to rent. Blackstone, BlackRock et al. Need to be dissolved by the FTC and their assets distributed amongst their victims. Story 14. It's not possible to be platonic friends with the opposite/another gender. This isn't to say there isn't any fantasizing doing the dirty, all genders do this, but some, especially guys in my life, think they have to act on interactions like this to get there, fulfill their desires, and find their life partner, that it's not possible to be friends for whatever toxic or untrusting reasons. I'm a guy in my 30s now. Some of my closest and best friend labeled friendships are still with women. It's made me more of a considerate person, friend, and better partner because of it. At least I value the relations I have with people over the need to have my willy wet at the sight of attractiveness. However, I've also had said friendships cause issues within their own romantic relationships because their partner could not fathom their partner having an opposite-gendered, guy in my case, friend. Story 15. That all volcanoes are full of bubbling lava all the time. Only a dozen-ish volcanoes have lava lakes out of the 1,500 or so active ones globally. Most are huge rocky pits. Many of those are emitting noxious fumes of various sorts, and some have crater lakes full of acid or acidic water. So, jumping into a volcano is like jumping off a cliff and wrecking your body and suffocating all the way down. But it is almost never jumping into lava. There are plenty of other misconceptions, but that's probably the most common one. Story 16. I've got a couple. That openly discussing mental health and trauma is oversharing and just looking for attention. Like, I understand if you're doing it to some random person you met that day, but talking about it to people you do know who follow you in social media or even who don't directly follow you, it can't help someone else. Anyone who hasn't experienced it needs to shut up in their privilege, and I don't care if me saying that angers people off. Second, that treating people the way you want to be treated means if you're kind to others, they'll be kind to you. All it's ever gotten me is hurt, used, mistreated, and taken for granted because people view my kindness as weakness. The others I won't post because I know I'll get attacked for it. Story 17. Everyone says tons of stuff that implies life is fair, and then when someone complains about unfairness, those same people will smugly say, whoever said life is fair. If you've ever thought, you get what you give, there's someone out there for everyone, karma's a witch, people get what they deserve in the end, be a good person and you will be rewarded for it. You are the person who said life is fair. I agree that life isn't fair. There is no magical balancing force, and there aren't many non-magical ones either, but the just world fallacy is incredibly pervasive. By pretending you don't buy into it at all whenever someone else is experiencing unfairness, you're just being a schmuck to someone who is probably complaining rightfully about an injustice that could be solved. You're responding with BS to deflect from helping in any way. Story 18. If you don't believe in God, then where's your moral compass? Steve Harvey. So many Christians have this view of atheists. There is a reason that most religions have relatively smaller ideas on so many things, why laws and basic morality have been so similar throughout history. Theft, generally inflicting harm on others without just cause, is bad because it's antithetical to an empathetic society. Because religion got these ideas from basic ingrained human morality, which is mostly just not being a schmuck. And are they saying that if not for their religion holding them back, would they then start committing crimes? Story 19. It'll be okay in the end because if it's not okay, it's not the end. Or in Bible speak, God doesn't give us anything we can't handle. Because it's just straight up not true. Sometimes crappy things just happen and people suffer and they pass away and it's not fair. I had to learn this at a very young age and unfortunately it had a very negative impact on my perspective of the world. So I'm really freaking trying to reframe this idea and develop a concept of life that is more motivating and not so nihilistic, but every single time I catch the news or learn of something messed up happening, it's just like further confirmation. Yes, I have depression. I really wish I could stop ruminating on this idea, but the older I get, the more difficult that seems to be. And if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 20. Alpha males, being dominant, aggressive men who bully and intimidate everyone else into submission. The guy who studied wolves and made that theory is himself trying to refute his own theory now that he knows it's wrong, but it's just made such a powerful cultural impact that he can't beat back the influence of his own outdated theory. Turns out in captivity, unrelated wolves do have to sort out hierarchies through aggression, but in the wild their packs are mostly nuclear families. To say the alpha behavior is normal would be like using prison inmate dynamics as standard models for human behavior. Story 21. That Disney's happily ever after stories are even remotely close to the original source material. I do deep dive research into folklore and clinical psychology for a project called Learn the Dark TV, and the 1800s' texts are basically horror movies. The lies we believe about these characters are wild. The Little Mermaid, 1837. Ariel didn't just lose her voice in a magical trait, the sea witch physically took her tongue out so she couldn't advocate for herself. Every step she took on land felt like treading on razor-sharp knives, and the prince didn't love her. He treated her like a pet and made her sleep on a velvet dog bed at the foot of his bed. Pinocchio, 1883. Disney made him a lovable misfit, but in the original text, he's a case study in conduct disorder. When Jiminy Cricket first tries to give him advice, Pinocchio doesn't just ignore him. He picks up a wooden hammer and smashes the cricket against the wall, ending him instantly. Frozen, the Snow Queen. It isn't about sisterly love. The original story starts with Satan making a magic mirror that shatters into billions of shards. If a shard gets in your eye, you can only see the ugliness in the world. If it hits your heart, it freezes into a lump of ice. It's amazing how much we've sanitized stories that were originally intended to be brutal psychological lessons about mutilation, trauma, and ego dissolution. Story 22. Parenting is its own reward. Parenting is the struggle. Your child's well-being and affection is the reward. The vast majority of people can't possibly dedicate 20 years of their life to raising a child without some manner of reciprocal love. And for that matter, children don't have any obligations to their parents. If your parents mistreated you, of course you don't owe them a thing, but if you have decent parents who invest their livelihoods in raising you well, you do owe it to them to call occasionally and be there for them when they need you. Story 23. Well, I have a lot, but the one that has stuck out to me was Bloomberg saying farmers just put seeds in the ground. It seems to be a very common thought for city dwellers. Break down anything to its simplest form. Sure, it's that easy. The same thing can be said, like fixing anything is just bolts and nuts, and chefs cook food and make meals and mix ingredients together and you make a cake. Lots of crap left out. Nothing is black and white, all lighter or darker shades of gray, but what do I know? Story 24. Just because you stopped arguing automatically means that the other side won. There are times when I'm in a disagreement where I realize the other side is just not listening or is not caring about what I say and will never change their POV. When this happens, I will often say, you know what, there's no point in arguing this if you're not going to listen, and I try to drop out and they take it as, haha, I won, or you know I'm right but don't want to admit it. No, they didn't really win. I'm just tired of arguing with somebody who's never going to change their mind no matter what I say. There just becomes a point where you realize that continuing is just stupid. Story 25. That local honey can help with allergies because it's made with the pollen causing your allergies, thus acting like allergy shots and building up your tolerance or immunity to that pollen. This is not true. This one drives me nuts because I have terrible seasonal allergies and I peddle in natural organic crowds, so people recommend it to me all the time. It's a myth, and it's actually cool why it is untrue. Pollen allergies are caused by wind-pollinated plants like trees and ragweed and grasses. Their pollinator is wind. All that pollen is blowing around, ending up on your car and windows and nostrils. Conversely, plants that are pollinated by bees have heavy pollen that needs to be weighty enough to stick to the bees. This pollen is not lightweight enough to blow around and end up in your nose. If you see a bee pollinating a flower, you can bet that plant is not a source of your seasonal allergies. This one is so pervasive that my actual doctor recommended it to me. Story 26. That you need to put up a ton of money to sue after being wronged. While this is true for a lot of types of lawsuits, being injured or having your work rights violated tends to be a contingency base, so you only pay if you win and it'll come out of the settlement money. Way too many people let their bosses walk all over them and believe this lie and refuse to fight for themselves. The lie is perpetuated by bad business owners to keep people from suing them, but if even a tenth of people do push back, it'll make it no longer profitable to skim pay or violate rights. Story 27. Lie. Longer ingredient lists mean bad food. Fact. Some things just take more ingredients to make. I wouldn't assume one pancake recipe is healthier just because it has fewer ingredients, so why judge foods you get from the store by that same metric? Lie. Chemicals are bad. Fact. Everything is a chemical. If you look up the chemical makeup of any raw or whole food, it's a long list of things you wouldn't know how to pronounce. Lie. Seed oils are bad. Fact. All studies suggesting seed oils have a harmful effect are either flawed, not peer-reviewed, or based on data that doesn't apply to the general population. Widely peer-reviewed and replicated studies show that using seed oils can be beneficial when switching from saturated fats, or at least have no negative effect. Using too much of any ingredient is bad for you, but you wouldn't demonize drinking water just because one person choked. Story 28. That all blondes are gold diggers, that all women are gold diggers. This does not bug me the most. That vote would change depending on the day. In fact, thanks to repressed wages for women in all professions for centuries, most women still earn less than men even if they are employed in the same profession. Therefore, if a woman partners with a man who earns more than her or who has earned more than her over his lifetime, which is how the damn system is designed, she's partnering up because men design the whole system that way. Since and including President Carter, all of our first ladies earned lower wages than their spouses. Why? Because the system is designed that way. The only woman who may have been equal in lifetime earnings until her spouse became president was Hillary Clinton. But maybe not. Maybe he earned more as a state politician than she did as a lawyer. I don't know. Doesn't matter because the pattern is clear just in our first ladies. Story 29. I'm probably going to get some flack for this, but here is what it truly means to be an introvert. Ever since the term entered the cultural zeitgeist, people have twisted what it means to be an introvert into an excuse to be isolated and helpless. All being an introvert means is you find intimate conversations more meaningful and worthwhile than surface-level interactions. The way you recharge your mental battery is through quiet reflection or time spent alone. That's it. I've heard people ask so many times, how do I meet people? I'm an introvert. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We're all born socially awkward and without social skills. Meeting people and making connections is a muscle you have to exercise. In short, if you want to meet people as an introvert, you have to put in the damn work. You have to put yourself out there, go to the meetup, be awkward, engage in a little small talk, and seek out folks you vibe with. Like any exercise regimen, it's going to be painful when you start, but as you exercise your social muscles, it gets so much easier. I'm an introvert who passes as an extrovert. This is mainly because I came of age before the internet was a thing. I was forced to get out and interact with people because that's how social currency worked when you couldn't hide online or behind a phone. Only people who really know me know how deeply introverted I am. Many people are surprised because I present as outgoing. I'm outgoing because I've learned that if I'm not, I don't get very far in my career, my life, or with the people I meet. Then I go home and bask in my quiet solitude until I have to do it all over again. Story 30. The whole love languages crap works on my last nerve. The guy that invented it has no background or education in psychology, counseling, or relationships, and the entire concept is permeated with his evangelical biblical beliefs and the submission of women and all that nonsense. It's religious junk repackaged as legitimate relationship counseling and then perpetuated as grift for decades. 5 times a day I see someone say, well, my love language is, and my eyes roll so hard I sprain something. The myth of love languages needs to pass away, a harsh, painful passing permanently. Story 31. That fountain soda is so insanely cheap. Stuff like the syrup is cheaper than the water, that the cup is the most expensive thing, etc. Fountain drinks are typically at a 1-to-5 ratio. The cheapest I could find for a 5-gallon BIB was $120, and that was for a diet soda. Full sugar is a lot more. That means you get 30 gallons for $120. That's 128 times 30 equals 3,840 ounces for 12,000 cents, or 3.125 cents per ounce of finished soda. That is not including any other costs. That means if you go get a big 52-ounce soda from a convenience store, it costs them at a minimum $1.62 just in syrup if you fill it all the way with no ice. The price I see these sold at are something like $1.98 right now, but you can get refills for way cheaper. Get a refill and you're actually costing them money for sure. Fountain soda is not the big moneymaker people think. Maybe it was at one time when a BIB was like $20, but a soda was $1 or whatever, but for at least 15 years since I started actually looking into it and how much something like a soda stream would cost, it has not been. Story 32. Historical myths that are thought to be truths, aka historical propaganda, especially political. Please, for the love of anything worthy, stop teaching children historical lies that then have to one day be undone by reading factual accounts that are backed up by research. No, George Washington did not cut down a cherry tree, fess up to it, and say he could not tell a lie. That is a myth that was invented by his biographer. In reality, he was a complicated man who did some horrible things, including owning slaves. He was not the epitome of a moral figure. That is just one example, but I wish people would actually learn history based on factually accredited sources. Story 33. I can't stand people who say, we aren't going to claim that when there is a situation that can't be changed. I have a genetic kidney disease, Alport syndrome, and I knew when it was diagnosed that it would mean kidney failure in 10 to 15 years. My mom, my brother, my son, all my maternal aunts, and a good chunk of my cousins have had it. It pretty much happens the same way to all of us who have had it or will have it. I do believe in God and His ability to perform miracles, but I'm not sure that it is something that happens regularly, if at all. I got so tired of coworkers telling me not to talk about it because I would claim or manifest it. I finally lost it on one of them and told her not to negate reality or my own attempts to be honest with myself. People facing inevitable hardships don't need to be silenced, as talking is one way of dealing with it. I don't believe that our open acceptance of a bad thing makes it happen. That's crazy. And I resent people who think I am somehow a lesser believer for accepting facts. The Bible has plenty of godly people who suffer terribly. Look at the disciples, and Jesus, if you believe in them, you know. I don't like a version of Christianity that can't cohabitate with science. For those who don't believe, don't come for me. I accept you and whatever your beliefs are. I won't try to proselytize to you, and this is not an attempt to rub your face in it. This is just the thing that drives me crazy. I won't even start on the prosperity gospel. God is not an ATM. Story 34, that God is all about love, forgiveness, and complete tolerance of sin, that he looks past our sins and forgives and accepts everybody regardless of who they are, is all a load of crap. It proves to me that anyone who says that has never read enough of the Bible, and definitely not Proverbs, Malachi, Ezekiel, or Revelation. God's character is very solid and holy. He doesn't tolerate sin and punishes people for being evil or just plain disobedient. And he is the same. He says he does not change. So, all those who claim he has a softer heart now and a tolerance for sin are either blind or they choose not to read the Bible. He punished people for sinning in the past, Old Testament. He punished people during the New Testament, and he will punish people in the future, Revelation. Punishment and correction is love, but people frolic about and dabble in sin thinking God is okay with it. They will meet God's judgment and correction, and that painful correction will be done with love. Story 35, that you don't have to care about other people besides those in your family or friends. You should care and empathize with everyone. This includes while driving, taking public transportation, grocery shopping, etc. People love to pretend that the others around them don't exist and in turn will treat people without common courtesy. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Hold the door open for others. Give up your seat on the bus to a pregnant or elderly person. Use your turn signal. Stop being jaded and rude just because you're bitter about life. You are responsible for your actions. Story 36. Vasectomies are considered permanent and no doctor will or should do one on someone who says they might want kids later. There are procedures to reverse a vasectomy, but fertility is never guaranteed. The reversal is more invasive and complex than the initial procedure, and it's rarely covered by insurance. On a similar note, studies into male birth control weren't stopped because the men couldn't handle side effects that were the same as women's. They were stopped because the side effects were both more frequent and unpredictable, which you don't want in a substance trial. Apart from that, there is the basic rule that a substance's risks have to outweigh the risk of not taking it, so by definition, male birth control can't have many risks. It sucks, and we desperately need more funding to research women's health and research into male options, but it's not as clear-cut as many people believe. Story 37. As a jeweler, I find it frustrating that people think all natural diamonds are conflict diamonds, and that no other gems are mined or lab-grown with sketchy labor practices. They also think every diamond feeds the De Beers coffers. In this day and age, it's easy to avoid De Beers diamonds simply by purchasing secondhand or through unaffiliated artisan miners. Currently, there are more conflict rubies on the market than conflict diamonds. For the most part, the issue of conflict diamonds has been resolved. Are there labor issues in the supply chain that can be improved? For sure, always. Has it gotten better? Indeed. Many subsistence farmers mine in the off-season for additional money. Without the gem trade, many of these places would face even worse poverty. No, your lab-grown diamond doesn't inherently make you more ethical. New diamonds, whether lab-grown or natural, have a huge social and environmental impact. And diamonds do hold up to wear and tear better than any other stone. No, cubic zirconia CZ is not just as hard or just as good. And no, most jewelers do not want to steal your stones. There are so many lies people believe about jewelry. Story 38, that if something good happens, it's because God intended it. I believe in God, but I absolutely deny this to be true. Because if it were true, that would mean God intends the bad things that happen to you too. When something miraculous in the generic way, not the spiritual way, happens and a person says, "We prayed and prayed for our little miracle child and God answered our prayers," what about all the believers out there who prayed 10,000 times more? Are we to believe that God just up and noped out? And then those people will say, "It's a sign you're intended to learn from this." I don't know. Lastly, people thinking God sees things the way we see them, like our skin color, gender preference, or identity. It's bonkers that human hang-ups are anything he would care about. Using God as a justification for one's own experiences, good or bad, doesn't seem very faithful. I think we really are teeny tiny specks and God only sees our souls. Story 39, that using unhealthy ingredients to make healthy food taste good somehow cancels out the health benefits. That's just not how it works at all. If you cook Brussels sprouts with bacon, the vitamins from the sprouts don't just magically disappear. It's one thing if it's just an adult making dumb decisions about their own diet, but what really angers me is when parents use that logic when feeding their kids. If your children's only experience of healthy food growing up is freaking unseasoned steamed veggies, then as soon as they move out, they're not touching another vegetable until their 40s, and once they do, it's only going to be occasionally, begrudgingly, as a form of medicine. If, on the other hand, you make the healthy food taste good by adding things like butter or bacon or cheese, then they'll grow up liking healthy food and they'll keep eating it after they move out. The little bit of fat and cholesterol are worth it in the long run. Story 40. God, I'm not trying to be edgy or anti-religious. I have no problem with people believing what they want. I sometimes just genuinely don't get the reasoning or the appeal. I grew up in a very religious family, and even as a child, I simply couldn't understand how anyone would take any of it seriously. So much so, I ended up studying psychology at university specifically to understand why and how people come to believe in religions. So I understand it from an academic, psychological, and philosophical perspective, culture, subjective experiences, and so on. But it still mildly annoys the heck out of me when I hear someone invoke God for anything. Story 41. That shaving makes your hair grow back thicker and faster is just a plain lie. It's a myth. The number of women and men who argue this is just crazy to me, especially when a simple search with a computer in your hand could tell you that it's a myth. I was told to shave my baby's head, and a lot of my other Hispanic friends shave their babies' heads, partly because it's cultural, but mostly because they actually thought the hair was going to grow back thicker. We have thick hair simply because we are Hispanic. The hair only appears to be thicker because the first baby hairs that grow in are thin, and that's it. Any baby is going to have thicker hair at 7 months to a year old than they did as a newborn. Story 42. Eating fruit is bad for you because it's high in sugar. There's a difference between the added sugars in processed foods versus the naturally occurring sugars in things like fruit or dairy. Foods with natural sugars have additional nutrients and components that slow digestion of the sugars and prevent these sugar spikes that lead to weight gain and diabetes. Even added sugars can be part of a healthy diet as long as they're consumed in moderation. When it comes to nutrition and fitness, so many people online preach things in black and white when it's much more complex than that. Story 43. Might get downvoted for this, but no one else has mentioned this, so I want to bring it up. The myth is having lots of savings is bad, often combined with people need to spend money to stimulate the economy. This is false, and it should be obvious if you take a few moments to think about it. All else being equal, money is acquired by doing work or otherwise providing value to people. You receive money specifically because you have provided more value than you have consumed. If you invert this and consume more than you produce, it destroys the aggregate wealth of society. Producing more than you consume, i.e. savings, is literally the reason we have any stuff at all, anything from skyscrapers to computers to cars to grocery stores, rather than being little more than animals just looking for our next meal. The reason often given for discouraging saving is to encourage investment, but it's not like no one would ever invest in anything otherwise. It's always a calculation of, is the interest or other potential gain I'm being offered worth the risk of this investment not working out? So logically, if you do anything to encourage investment, you are encouraging investment in lower quality projects because all the best projects will be invested in regardless. Do this for long enough and you even incentivize investment in projects that consume more than they produce, destroying aggregate wealth. Story 44. Cats will steal a baby's breath. I know people who actually rehomed their cats when they had babies because they believe this. I even had someone try to convince me, a child at the time, that my parents were terrible for keeping their cats when my sister was born. Cats do not steal babies' breath, and even if they did, there's this thing called the door, and you can shut it when baby is sleeping to keep cats out. Like, just don't let cats sleep with babies. Probably best to not let cats around the baby unsupervised anyway. Well, if you like these stories, there's more for you. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. I'll catch you in that video.